Year 10 and 11, welcome to your revision for the AQA English Language Paper 2 reading section, with the focus being question 4. Please check out my other videos on question 1, 2 and 3. This question is worth 16 marks and it is focusing on assessment objective 3, which is compare writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. A reminder of what is included in paper 2 is that you are given 2 texts, both of which are non-fiction. As I say on my other videos, you can prepare for this by reading articles and journals and diary entries. Both the texts are linked by topic, and it's usually a topic that has changed over time, so racism, feminism, things like that. And then finally they are from different centuries. One text is likely to be pre-19th century and the other one more modern. On these videos I've just been using 2 modern texts just as a means of showing you quick revision, but remember, for you, one of your texts will be pre-19th century. Now, whilst this is a video on question 4 on paper 2, what you should have picked up is that question 2 has already asked you to write a summary of the differences between the 2 articles, or it might even say write a summary of the similarities. I don't know. The chances are it might say write a summary of the differences. Now, when we are going to then go to question 4, which is going to ask us to compare the 2 texts, in essence, we kind of should have an idea of what the answer is. Don't forget, we've already written 3 answers to 3 questions here, which again will help us with the final question, which is question 4. So certainly question 2 should provide some sort of foundation for when you get to question 4, which is the 16-mark question, where we have to compare the articles and write about the differences. Okay? I'm going to bring up the 2 texts again just to remind you what we are dealing with. I realise that the quality hasn't been brilliant, so what I'll do is I'll do each article paragraph by paragraph. Please make sure you either take a snapshot on your phone so you can refer back to it later and read it, or pause the video and read the article closely. Now, the 2 articles, as you'll know from video 1, 2 and 3, are the Holocaust denial and Anne Frank's diary. So I'll just bring up the 2 articles as a reminder. So this is paragraph 1 of the article titled Holocaust Denial. Again, we've just done it paragraph by paragraph so that the quality is a bit easier for you to read. Pause the video and read it, and I shall bring up the next section of this article. Same again, pause the video here and make sure you read the article closely. And then on the next section I shall bring up the final paragraph, and that is article 1 done. Please make sure you have read it carefully in preparation for the 16-mark question. And this is the last paragraph. Pause the video, read it, and on the following slides I shall bring up the Anne Frank extract, which we are going to use as our comparison piece. This is article 2 then, the diary of Anne Frank, and same again, this is your first paragraph. Pause the video, read it carefully, and I shall bring up the second paragraph. As you read, think about how it is different to the Nick Griffin article. Paragraph 2 then of your second article, which is the diary of Anne Frank, is there. Again, make sure you read it carefully, and I shall bring up paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 is there for you to read again, and then there's one more paragraph, and that is the 2 articles we are concentrating on. So as I say, make sure you have read them as best you can in preparation for looking at this quite long and quite complex question for 16 marks. So this is the final paragraph. I shall bring it up. There you go. That is the end of the diary entries we will be looking at in preparation for this question. I hope you've paused the video where necessary. I realise it's not ideal reading it off the screen, but it just means that when I'm discussing things from the articles, you know exactly what I am referring to. Because this is a comparison question and the assessment objective actually states compare, I've just provided you a list of connectives there that we might use. The top connectives in the dark colour are when articles are different. So you've got whereas, on the other hand, however, in contrast, unlike and alternatively. And in red there, if the articles are similar in any way, you might use similarly, likewise, equally, as with, and in the same way. So just make sure that when you have finished the 16-mark question, you probably want to spend around 20 minutes on this question. It's the biggest one on the reading section. Make sure that when you check your answer, you have actually compared. And connectives are a very easy way to do that. So in this instance, let's imagine that the question says the following. Now you are told that you need to refer to the whole of the Nick Griffin source and the whole of the Anne Frank source. So we know that we're using the entire extracts from both. So the question, compare how Nick Griffin and Anne Frank convey their different attitudes to the Holocaust. In your answer, you should. Now, these 3 bullet points seem to be standard across the questions, and they are telling you that you have to compare the different attitudes, compare the methods they use to convey the attitudes, and support your ideas with quotations. Well, the bottom one goes without saying, because we know that we need to support everything that we say about the texts with evidence and with quotations. And remember that this is for 16 marks. So what I thought I'd do is bring up some ideas that we might consider and then bring up the methods that are used. Okay, so on the next bit, I'm just going to suggest some ideas. So if we're thinking about attitudes towards the Holocaust, then Nick Griffin's attitude seems to be that he's very defensive and ignorant of the events that have taken place. Don't forget that the whole article is called Holocaust Denial and the word hoax is used. He also made a statement that the Holocaust is a moral club. Again, that seems to be making light of it. He has been convicted for inciting racial hatred. So again, if we're thinking about the Holocaust and what actually happened there, he claims the Holocaust was a hoax. He believes the Holocaust is being exploited. He is the leader of the British National Party. So those are some of the things you should consider about that article. Now, when we look at Anne Frank's diary, her attitude is one of distress, isn't it? And even that word doesn't do it justice. She's traumatised. She feels anxious about living in Germany. She states that she's lost her freedom. She's frightened to do things in case she's punished. She describes the physical suffering of having no food and shaving their heads. And every noise scares her. So we do have 2 very different attitudes here in terms of the events that took place during the time of the Holocaust. The methods used then. Actually, the methods used by both are quite similar. Nick Griffin, we have the repetition of the adjective wicked. Likewise, in terms of repetition, Anne Frank repeats quite a few times, Jews were forbidden. They both use emotive language. Anne Frank more so for obvious reasons, but they both do. Nick Griffin's emotive language also uses alliteration when it says dismay and disgust. Whereas in Anne Frank's diary, you've got quite a lot of emotive language. You've got dismal, depressing, scared, frightened. Again, but she uses alliteration in dismal and depressing, so that is another similarity, emotive language and alliteration there. And then there's more to say about the Anne Frank one, because if you look at question 3 where we discussed her language, she compares the German military to monsters, and that's a key metaphor, so you could include that here. Again, I'm just picking out the obvious ones for you. But Nick Griffin, he isn't the writer of that article, as I'm sure you've picked up, so we've got to be very careful there. But the writer conveys Nick Griffin's attitude through a lot of single word quotations from Griffin himself. And hoax and exploited are the two key ones, where Griffin has said in the past that he believed the Holocaust was a hoax and that it is used to exploit other people. Now, by quoting Griffin through single words only, we do get his attitude coming through. So those are the methods I think that the writers use to convey their attitudes. But as I say with the Anne Frank one, there is a lot more to say there. Now, the beauty of this paper, as I've already said, is that in question 2, we already wrote a summary of the differences. And in question 3, we already wrote about language in one of the extracts. So technically, in many ways, question 4 has subtly and subconsciously been answered. We just need to put it into words, if you like. I shall just bring up a sample response. It is by no means finished. It is just an example of how we might structure this answer. So, for instance, we might write something like, Anne Frank and Nick Griffin seem to have opposing attitudes towards the Holocaust. Firstly, Anne Frank actually experienced the Holocaust firsthand, and therefore her attitude is one of distress, and she often expresses horror and disgust about the events taking place. They frequently offer a bounty, so much per head. It's like the slave hunts of the olden days. In stark contrast to this, Nick Griffin is a politician, and his attitude is one of ignorance, even going so far as to claim that the Holocaust was a moral club. Anne Frank's autobiographical account allows her to detail very earnestly the disgust she feels, and she uses a lot of emotive language throughout the diary. Depressing, scared. On the other hand, Griffin's ignorant attitude is communicated via a third party who uses his statements and often presents them as single-word quotations, hoax and exploited. Moreover, it is also made clear that Griffin has a criminal record. Mr. Griffin was convicted of incitement to racial hatred and is the leader of the British National Party, allowing the reader to infer that his attitude can at times appear narrow-minded. Okay, so I hope this video has been useful. Please check out my other videos which detail how to answer question 1, 2 and 3. And don't forget there's also a playlist for English language AQA paper 1. If you need any more of my videos, just check out my YouTube channel. Just type in Stacey Reay, Stacey, and Reay is Raay. And good luck in your English language exam.